This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to Plain Talk Live. I'm your host, Rob Port. So we're going to talk about critical race theory again. And by using that term, maybe I've already got the hackles on some of your necks standing up already, because it's become sort of a, how do I want to put it? It just gets people riled up. There was a meeting about it where they were discussing it in Fargo, and people showed up and they were protesting, and the police had to be called, which is just a not so great thing about modern American politics. Like, can we just have conversations without showing up and screaming at each other? Maybe that would be a good place to start. Anyway, critical race theory is, it's a confusing thing because it's a term that gets used, but I'm not sure, and it is, it's a term, it's been around for a long time. It describes a very specific thing, but I think people are using it just as a proxy for culture war, just a proxy for there are people who maybe believe things culturally that are different from what I believe. Therefore, I don't want them teaching in my schools, or I don't want them teaching their culture, or my kids being exposed to their culture in my school. I'm not even sure that's specifically critical race theory. I think that's just culture war. Anyway, my guest is Nick Archuleta. He is the president of North Dakota United. And he actually wrote a letter to the editor, or I guess a column to my employer's publication, Fargo Forum, Grand Forks Herald. The headline was, "Critical Race Theory is a Theory, Not Curriculum." And he had some interesting things to say. Here's a quote. "We are hearing about critical race theory now due to a concerted effort to gin up another front in our nation's ongoing culture war. Political opportunists have redefined critical race theory into something that is meant to alarm the public. These charlatans contend that critical race theory has been unleashed into our schools to indoctrinate students to hate America and to blame white persons for America's ills. They are taking the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with the Americans and rebranding them as, quote, critical race theory." He continues, "Know this, critical race theory is not present in North Dakota's public schools. Our outstanding professional educators teach to standards designed by North Dakota teachers for North Dakota students and approved by locally elected school boards. If anyone wants to know what is being taught in our public school classrooms, they need only to talk to their school board members, school administrators, or, most importantly, our kids as teachers." Nick, first of all, what prompted you to write the column? Like, what was on your mind as you were thinking, I need to send something in?
Well, I've read a couple of pieces in area newspapers across the state, and I've also looked in on a couple of school board meetings, one in particular in Grand Forks, where folks were coming to the microphone and expressing their concern that our students were being taught to hate America. Our students were being taught to judge people by the color of their skin as opposed to the content of their character. And I know, because I'm in touch with teachers on a daily basis, I know that is not what is going on in our schools. And so with that background, I decided that I would finally say something. And I was a little reluctant to write this letter because I didn't want to give this issue any more oxygen than necessary. But at the same time, I couldn't sit back and listen to our teachers being accused of indoctrinating students as opposed to teaching students. And I know how hard our school boards and our administrators work to make sure that these kids, along with teachers, have a wonderful educational experience, and an enriching educational experience.
Not to interrupt you, but let's start right there, because I also work in a profession where people tend to refer to the media as if it were this monolithic entity, right? As if we're all going to meetings on Friday afternoons or something and getting our talking points, which I got to tell you, and maybe I'm talking too much. I barely talk to my employers at the forum. They just kind of let me, I think they should just let Port do what he's going to do. Maybe I'm talking too much, but this idea that like we're all being indoctrinated, I think people make the same mistake about teachers. And I mean, listen, my wife's gonna be a teacher soon. She's nearing the end of her degree. I have friends who are teachers. I have friends who teach teachers for a living. This is a diverse group of people. And I'm not saying diverse as in like skin color or religion or things like that. I'm meaning diverse as in like thought diversity. I know some teachers who are glinty-eyed capitalists and some teachers who are hippies. They're all over the map, and I think the one thing that unites them all is they just want to teach kids and educate them and expose them to new ideas and get them ready for the world. And I mean, I think we need to live in a society where it's okay for a Democrat to teach your kid, or it's okay for a Republican to teach your kid, and maybe you just need to be okay with that. So I think that's mistake number one. And maybe, I don't know if you agree with me or not, I think that's mistake number one is a lot of the people, I think, complaining about this are assuming that teachers are like this monolithic, or educators are this monolithic group of people, and they're just not.
Well, we must know a lot of the same people, Rob. That I can tell you that because I have conversations with teachers, and in fact, when this issue of critical race theory first rose up in North Dakota, I got emails from teachers saying, "Hey, I'm not in favor of this critical race theory being taught," and I said, "You know what? Me either." And it's a good thing it's not being taught then, because it isn't. It's not a curriculum, as I mentioned. It's a theory, and it's meant to be debated in higher education, not in K-12 education. But you're right. We're not monolithic as a group. I think our membership looks pretty much like the state looks, and in terms of ideology. So yeah, I think that your observation is spot on.
So do you think there's any valid reason? Because you said you're concerned about critical race theory. Now I think we can look at North Dakota, and I agree with you. You know better than I do, but I pay attention to what my kids are in the Minot public school system, and I pay attention to, what their teachers are. And I've had conversations with teachers in the past about, what's coming up in class, and just, I've expressed concerns. And I feel like it's always been a nice conversation. I send an email, I make a phone call, we have a conversation. It's always ended well. I've always been very satisfied with the outcomes. I don't perceive this as being a problem in North Dakota. But a lot of times with these issues, what drives them is things are happening somewhere else. Like we're watching YouTube videos of a school board meeting in Virginia for some reason. I can't imagine why, as a North Dakotan, I'd want to watch a school board meeting in Virginia, but here we are. So it's like, well, it's happening over there. It could happen here. Therefore, we're all going to get real mad and angry, and we're going to show up at our school board to make sure it doesn't happen here. Do you feel like this is happening anywhere? I mean, do you have any concerns as you look across the country saying, God, maybe there's some validity to this?
That's a great question, Robin. And I've been in contact with the people who do my job in the other 49 states in the District of Columbia. And by and large, they are as perplexed as we are. Every single school district is governed by a locally elected school board. And if those folks are being elected and then allowing curriculum or theories to be taught that run counter to what is generally accepted in the community, my guess is that they would be run out or recalled or something in that order. We're not seeing that. What we do see, though, and I think we had a fairly good discussion about this, is that there's a lot of false narrative out there around what critical race theory is. And not just that, but what are they teaching our kids about racism? And this particularly came to light after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I think that a lot of that happened uncovered an awful lot of tension, if you will, and really made people start thinking. And I think that also created some fear. And when we are afraid as individuals or as a collective group, we tend to maybe act irrationally and believe things that we might know better. But and so maybe that has something to do with it. But I can tell you that in my discussions with people around the country, there has not been a wholesale change in what has been taught historically.
We actually had an incident in Wapaton if I'm remembering right,
Mhm.
where I think it was like a third or fourth grade class, elementary school class, where the teacher, the kids were discussing George Floyd, because I think it was right contemporaneous to the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, and so the kids, not unsurprisingly, were discussing, the thing that I'm sure they've heard their parents talking about, the thing I'm sure they've heard on the radio and they've seen on the internet and everything. They were discussing it in the classroom. Some of the kids got up and they were maybe reenacting that horrific scene that we all saw in the video of George Floyd's life ending. And then I guess at some point the teacher put a stop to it. But anyway, that became like a huge controversy. So people posted on social media, and I don't know, like I read that and I'm thinking to myself, of all the very provocative, like some of my most memorable experiences from my experience in K through 12 were those days where you kind of got off subject in the classroom, but you ended up having kind of a provocative discussion, and you had kids around the classroom. Everybody's engaged. The teacher's engaged. The teacher's telling you stories. I always thought that those were very valuable. I remember those days. What I'm afraid of is that if we don't unclench a little bit and just allow some of this stuff to happen, if we're just going to get up in arms, whether you're right or left, if you're just going to get up in arms because a controversial topic was talked about in the classroom today, we are not doing our kids any favors. Kids
No.
should be allowed to talk about George Floyd and express themselves freely, and not be and the teacher shouldn't be scared of reprisal because they facilitated discussion. The kids shouldn't have to be worried. We live in America, damn it. We should be able to have these conversations.
I think that's the quintessential American lesson, isn't it? If you want to see kids turn off in school, don't talk about something that interests them, particularly in the moment, in a historical moment such as that. There are ways to do that. I don't believe that teachers should go into a classroom and push their particular ideology or their particular politics, but I don't think they should shy away either from examining something that is going on in real time in their country that their kids are desperately interested in. And I think we do a disservice to those students and the communities when we don't do that. You're right. I might not have used the term unclench, but I get the idea.
Yeah, well, okay, fair enough. My vocabulary runs away with me at times. I will tell you one thing that did concern me. We had the debate about the 1619 project, and I mean, and that was very explicitly. I mean, the New York Times made it very clear that they were going to push that as curriculum. I guess I don't know if they were going to like make it for sale. I don't know how that works. Like if it was, you're going to purchase school districts are going to purchase the materials from the New York Times and incorporate it into classrooms. I don't know how that works, but they were very explicit. This is a work. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's this rigorous academic work. And I think it's, and I think there's a lot of people, not just a conservative point of view, who fundamentally disagree with the premises of that piece. I would have a problem, and I don't think it is. To my knowledge, that has not come to North Dakota. That's not been incorporated in any North Dakota curriculum. I would have a problem if something like that came to my school and was going to be taught in my child's classroom, because I think it's inaccurate. There's all sorts of, the premise that the American Revolution was fought to protect slavery. No, it wasn't. Obviously slavery was a part of America. I don't want to deny that. I don't want to turn my face from that. That's reality. We should confront that reality. But that conclusion is a false conclusion. If that's going to be taught in school, which I think is a point you made, we should want to teach truth in school, truth. And I realize ascertaining what's true and what's not, there's all sorts of subjective things that go into that sometimes. It's hard to ascertain what is the truth. But I mean, something like the 1619 project, I think was an overt effort. I think some of the stuff about critical race theory, I agree with you. Maybe it's a little ginned up, but something like the 1619 project, that's very real. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you, but here's one thing that we have said over and over at North Dakota United is that we believe in local control. And so if a school board wants to teach that, and if they've done their research on the 1619 project, and they think, this is pretty credible, by gosh, we're going to implement it. Then they have a discussion with their constituents, right?
Right.
But in terms of that being in North Dakota, no, it's not in North Dakota. I don't even believe that the 1619 project will be taught in North Dakota, just because we have such a strong measure of local control. And frankly, I would really encourage everybody to study it. I know you have, but read these materials. I mean, when you take somebody's word all the time, especially if you're getting all of your information from a single source, it really does you a disservice as someone who discerns what is right and wrong.
I have people sometimes that tell me, like, I think they want to compliment me. They come and tell me, they're like, "You're the only place I get my news," and I'm like, "Oh God, don't do that." Which probably sounds terrible. Like I'm undermining my own credibility. But geez, don't just listen to me. Read other people too. Like, be a thoughtful person, for crying out loud. Don't do that.
Yeah, and I think it's more interesting. I think you become a more well-rounded person if you watch Fox and MSNBC and CNN and read different.
I don't watch any of those. We might disagree. Well. Like, maybe don't waste your time with cable television. But anyway, but I say this, I subscribe to National Review and the New Yorker. I subscribe to the Atlantic and Human Events. I used to subscribe. I don't know where Human Events went, but. Anyway, it's a weird discussion, and it just keeps coming back, I think, to these very fundamental problems in American society, which is that we're so afraid of being exposed to ideas that we disagree with. And I think it's a lot of where we're going overboard on censoring things on social media. Like, at one point, if you wrote a post saying, gosh, maybe the coronavirus started in the province in China that's right near the lab where they were studying coronavirus, maybe that's a likely outcome, you'd get banned on Facebook, stuff like that. We're so afraid of people being exposed to things that we don't like that we have these massive overreactions to it. And I don't know why we're so worried about it.
Yeah, here's the thing. My only concern is that there is such misinformation is just so rife on some of these social media networks, and I know in a perfect world we wouldn't have misinformation, but there are some people that I believe are actually profiting from this misinformation and for keeping people consistently.
Maybe some of the cable news networks you just mentioned. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll withdraw that comment if it's not too late. But on the matter of critical race theory, I was just reading this Reuters Ipsos poll, and 78% of Americans support teaching about slavery, including 90% of Democrats and 70% of Republicans. 73% support teaching high school students about racism and its effects on the country. Then 90% of Democrats and 60% of Republicans. So I don't think, by and large, that the American public is afraid of teaching some of these issues about racism and social injustice. I think that they want to make sure, though, that the sources that are going to be used are balanced. And in fact, there was a gentleman, and his name is Jason Glass, and he's the Commissioner of Education in Kentucky. He said, don't waste your time banning critical race theory. Just mandate that you have balanced discussions on these issues. So, and I think that might be a pretty common sense way of approaching it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's. I am fond of the idea that the price of admission to America is that you're going to see and hear some things you don't like. And I'm really struck. Like, the misinformation stuff you're talking about, I agree. I mean, whether we're talking about vaccinations or election myths or a lot of this other stuff, there's people who just believe it. And, the internet has made it very, very easy for those people to organize and have a louder voice than ever before. And so that old adage that the solution to speech you don't like is more speech is hard in this environment. It's hard. Now, I don't want to give up on that idea, I guess, is my point. But we can't be afraid of confronting things we don't like. You could simultaneously love America. I love the United States of America. I love the ideas that this country was founded to pursue. I can believe that and believe that we are an exceptional country while simultaneously confronting the fact that we have often fallen short of what we aspire to. Like, these things can be true at the same time. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. But it seems like in so many of our debates, one of the debates that drives me nuts about Christopher Columbus is obviously there's two sides. I mean, when I was at school, we were taught Christopher Columbus and the Mayflower came over and he discovered America, right? And obviously, there's another side to that story. That's very important. And a lot of terrible things proceeded from that discovery, but it doesn't change the fact that from the European perspective, he did discover the New World, or at least for his faction of European society. Some would say that maybe the Norwegians discovered North America even well before that, but I don't know. What I want to be as we go through this, I don't want to replace one myopia with another. I don't want to be put ourselves in a situation where we're gonna obviously that myopic teaching of Christopher Columbus from one perspective is wrong and needs to change. But I don't want to replace it with another myopia where that was just an inherently an act of evil and only terrible things proceeded from it, because that's also not true. And which I think maybe is to your point about balance.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Christopher Columbus, of course, gets a different sort of treatment in history because his voyage, although he never set foot in what is now the United States of America, although his voyages did open up sustained contact between the old world and the new world. And you're right, there are a lot of great things that happen as a result of that, a lot of terrible things that happen to some indigenous people as a result of that, and we should learn both of those things. It's not America love it or leave it, it's America love it and improve it. And if we're not going to look at our history and admit that we could have done things better and then set ourselves on a course to do so, then we're missing an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. So again, I don't think critical race theory is an issue in North Dakota. I don't know anywhere where it's being taught. I don't know anywhere where even curriculum like the 1619 project like that's being taught. If you have concerns about your local curriculum, you should talk to them about your school board members. And if you want to know somebody, I mean, it's not that hard to win a school board. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, it takes a lot of work. But, I mean, these are very accountable people, right? It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to get a lot of votes to swing a school board election if you really want to. Those people are very, I want to use the word vulnerable, but vulnerable to in the way of accountability, and that if you really want to get after them because you think they're doing the wrong thing, it's not that hard to do it. You can engage the process and you can do it. And that's just the solution, I think, is we have a process set up to address these concerns. Use it.
We do have a process. And North Dakota, one of the things I love about North Dakota is that even if you're talking about your governor or congressional delegation, I mean, I don't know, almost every North Dakotan is probably shaken hands with either the governor or Senators Kramer and
yeah,
Hoeven.
I had Ed Schaefer on earlier this week, and we were talking about the term limits thing, and I made the point. I said a statewide elected official who's working hard can probably count on getting in the same room with just about every North Dakota voter who's going to vote for them if they really want to.
And those are the big dogs in government for North Dakota. But right. I would think that the school board members are even closer to the people.
You go on the legislative website, most of the lawmakers have cell phones listed. You know how weird that is? Compared to other states?
I would be interested to know how many state legislators across the country have listed their personal
cell phones. They have their home phones. You call them up, you'll get their kid will answer like, hello? And it's like, oh, is Representative so-and-so there? And like dog's barking and like, yeah, just a minute. Dad! That's one of the beautiful things about living in North Dakota. So how would you advise, I mean, people who are concerned about critical race theory, how would you advise them to inform themselves on it?
Well, if I were them, the first thing I would do is, as I mentioned in my piece in the Fargo Forum and Grand Forks Herald, is that I would engage with my students' teachers, my school board members, and administrators in those schools to find out exactly what is going on there. The World Wide Web is a huge place with lots of information. I think you could probably, everybody that can run their Google machine can find out about critical race theory, what it is, and more importantly, what it isn't, and then make an informed decision about whether or not what they see in their schools is actually critical race theory. But if we're going to and this I think is something that has happened, critical race theory, the folks like Christopher Rufo and others who have really ginned this up, they basically redefine what critical race theory is, and now they're demanding that it be eliminated in places where it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in K-12 schools. And then they try to diminish its effectiveness in places where it does exist, which are schools of law across the country. So I would just be a real, I don't know, real responsible consumer of information.
And I think sometimes if somebody is saying something and it's got your hackles up, or your eyebrows are raising, and you're wondering about it, just pause for a moment. It doesn't. What I'm about to say doesn't necessarily mean that this person is wrong, because there's all sorts of things that are happening in the world that should make our hackles get up and should make us question things. But I think you need to remember that in this environment right now, it's very easy to make a lot of money from making you mad.
Yeah.
And so I think you got to ask yourself: is this person? Are they identifying real problems, or are they creating faux controversy because they needed to fill some hours on talk radio, or they needed to book some guests on their latest TV show? Because I think a lot of times you're going to find out it's not that bad. And also, I think sometimes it's easy to demonize people that you're not talking to. So
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to be upset with a school board member that you've never had a conversation with, or a teacher, or to assume things about a teacher that you maybe haven't really sat down and had a meeting with. Again, these people are eminently accessible in North Dakota, of all places, and just talk to them. And you may find out that they agree with you more than you think.
Precisely.
Anything else, Nick? I think we covered it pretty well. I don't think this debate's going away, at least until we find the next thing to be outraged about. But
Exactly. I would just hope that at some point we can just take a step back and take a deep breath, unclench, if you will, and really take a look at what is it that we want in public education. What is really going on? What can we do to make it better so that our students graduate with all the skills they need to get
Right.
along in a very complex world?
And just we're not all going to agree and strum the guitar and sing Kumbaya either. At the end of
No.
the day, we're all going to see the world differently, and maybe just accept that as being okay. I will tell you, as somebody who's very politically involved, I don't worry that much about my kids agreeing with me on everything. I teach them to work hard and to be honest, and I hope that they aspire to those things. But beyond that, if they disagree with their dad, we're going to have some very interesting conversations sometimes around the dinner table, and that's going to be that.
Yeah, and you know what? You're going to learn as much from them as they are from you, and that's the way it ought to be.
Not yet, but maybe one day. No, I'm kidding. I do. They're smart kids. Nick, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for having me.